Hello, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Sorry about this, guys. Okay, can you hear me? I'm so sorry that I'm so late. It's just one of those days getting my little one to bed, and then my laptop decided not to connect to the live video, so I'm having to use my phone instead. So if anyone's watching this now, welcome. Can you just give me a thumbs up or a comment if you can hear me? Because I don't want to waffle on and then find out that you've missed it all. So just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, okay? Okay, so hello and thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Sarah from Only Human Therapy, and thank you for joining my group that I set up this week. It's nice to have so much support already. It's quite exciting as well. So lots going on. Tonight I wanted to talk about anxiety and panic attacks, because it's probably one of the most common things that I come across in both my personal life and my therapy life. So I'm hoping that a lot of you can identify with the things that I'm going to talk about, and please feel free to ask questions as well. I'm trying to, bear with me a second, I'm trying to get this up so that I've got it on my laptop and my phone. So if it looks like I'm looking over here, it's because I'm trying to read the messages on the laptop rather than on my phone. So you'll just have to bear with me. So happy Friday. It's Friday, isn't it? Yeah, it's Friday. So for those of you that don't know about what I do, I work from the Human Givens approach to psychotherapy. So it's a very holistic approach, and it looks at the whole person, and rather than just presenting issues. So obviously tonight I'm going to be talking about anxiety and panic attacks, but what I want to do is just kind of stress that it might link into other things and I might go off tangent, but the sort of overall holistic approach to psychotherapy, it does sort of, often you'll find that what I'm talking about might not seem relevant to anxiety and panic attacks, but it is, and everything is kind of all interlinked when we're talking about emotional needs and resources. So let's get started. There we go. So anxiety, what is it? What does it make us feel? And what do we know about it? I'm asking these questions because I'd love for you to interact and make comments if you feel that you want to share things with the group. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. So my personal sort of, my explanation of anxiety would be similar to that of the fight or flight response. So I'm sure that you know about sort of the way that our brains are designed as animals, because other species share this with us. So anxiety is what you're experiencing, for instance, when you have fear, or when you're stressed. That's another sort of term for anxiety, but it's a really broad term. So what it means for me is different to what it means for you, and that's different to what it means for somebody else. So I think it's really useful for yourself just to sort of try and unpack that and find out, what it means for you. I don't want to just give you a list of all the things that are symptoms of anxiety, because that's not really helpful. What's going to be helpful for you is to find out what it is for you, and also then you can sort of work on specific goals that will help with how you're going to overcome that. Panic attacks, on the other hand, are a bit more easy to define because they are sort of recognised by the medical profession, and there are so many physical symptoms that you can specifically link to a panic attack that it's a lot more easy to explain. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about panic attacks, and I don't know how many people here have experienced them, but it can be an extremely terrifying experience, and something that you wouldn't wish that upon anyone. And if there's anybody here that has them regularly, then you need to be thinking about what's triggering them and how long they last for. And whilst you're having one, it feels like your world is going to end. It feels like you're dying, and it feels like it's going to last forever. I know that. But the good thing is that a panic attack cannot last for more than 15 minutes. It simply can't. So if you're experiencing stress as a byproduct of that, you might be sort of still in that sort of hypervigilance state, but a panic attack itself does not last for longer than 15 minutes. So that's something good to remember, because although it may seem like a very long time whilst you're in that moment, it's not going to go on forever. And there are some really quick and good things that you can do whilst you're having a panic attack to calm you down. So I'm going to be flitting from one thing to another here, but if I don't remember, then I will come back at the end to tell you about what you can do to help with panic attacks. So I'm going to talk here about resilience and stress as well, because they're very much part of anxiety and panic attacks, because the more resilience you have, the less anxiety you'll experience, and the less stress you will experience. So they're all interlinked. So our ability to deal with anxiety and deal with difficulties is again related to how resilient we are. And if if your environment is a toxic environment, whether that's at home or work, it's going to be an anxiety provoking environment. So that's going to make you more susceptible to experiencing something. So that therefore you need to work on your own resilience and your own emotional needs. Things like being able to overcome problems or difficulties, again, is directly linked with resilience. But if you're experiencing anxiety, then it's going to affect your ability to do that, and your ability to think clearly. So as soon as one of our needs is not being met, and we've got 9 emotional needs, as soon as one of these is not being met in balance, that's when we start to experience anxiety, depression, stress, even psychosis in serious cases. So it's really, really important to look after your own and know what makes you feel anxious or what triggers a panic attack. If there's something that causes it regularly, then you need to avoid that situation, or at least try to not put yourself in that situation as frequently or for a long period of time, because that's not good for you. First things first, when you're having a panic attack or feeling anxious, is to calm down. And I know you might think that's easy for me to say now, but it's the key to sort of regaining control of your logical and your rational brain. So whatever it may be that triggers your anxiety or panic attack, the first thing I would stress is to concentrate on your breathing, because quite often you'll be breathing really, really fast, so you start hyperventilating, and that's only going to make you more anxious, because then you feel that you're not getting enough air, which is true. If you're hyperventilating, you're not getting enough oxygen. The old brown paper bag technique does actually work in this situation, and so I would recommend, if you're not familiar with a breathing technique that works for you, then breathe into a bag. By all means do that, just don't do a plastic bag. I know that it's not necessarily likely that you'll have that on your person when you do, appear in a situation, but it's something that does work. But the quickest thing to do is 7-11 breathing, which I teach to all my clients, because it's based on science. It does work if you do it properly. So if a person is having a panic attack in front of me, which has happened before in therapy, first thing I do is get them to breathe in for a count of 7, their own count. And they're inflating their diaphragm, so really breathing from the diaphragm. And then you breathe out for a count of 11. So the out breath is prolonged. And they think that it's counterintuitive sometimes, because you feel like you need to be breathing in more. But actually, when you're hyperventilating, you're breathing in too often and too much. So you need to prolong the out breath in order to actually get that oxygen and CO2 cycle going properly. And that is what calms you down. So the out breath being slower. And also, it's really key to try and get that from your diaphragm, because if you're breathing up here, you're not going to feel like you can get enough oxygen in. So breathing in for 7. Try it now with me if you want. And then breathing out for 11. And you only need to do that for about 5 minutes to really, really feel a benefit. Doing it for even longer is just going to make even more of a benefit. So I recommend doing it as much as possible. You know, even if you're not somebody who's currently suffering from anxiety or panic attacks, this is a prevention technique. And it's like anything, if you practice it, you're going to get good at it. And the more you do it, the less you're going to suffer. So that's the first thing. Secondly, in a panic attack, it's another one which seems a bit counterintuitive, but if you get somebody to jog on the spot or do something really physical, like running up and down the stairs, it reinforces to their brain, their sort of animal brain, that they're not in danger. And so what's happening when you're in that state is your body's kind of responding in the fight or flight or freeze mode, as if you were under attack and there's a danger there. But the unfortunate thing is that in our society, most of the time now when that's happening, there is a perceived threat, but not a real threat. And so it feels like a real threat, and that's what your body's going through. But if you trick your body and your mind into doing something else, so running on the spot, running up and down the stairs, your body then begins to realise that actually what you're going through is not a situation that requires an immediate response, but it allows you to just calm down. And by speeding up your body, you then naturally, you're getting your breathing back in control. So as weird as it sounds, that's another thing that works really well. So after a panic attack, it's really useful to to go back and identify the points where, if you can recognise exactly what caused it, it's really specific details. So what time of day was it? Where were you? Who were you with? Who were you not with? What did you eat before? Literally, like, in really, really specific detail. And that's going to help you, therefore, moving forward in the future. I hope all this makes sense. I haven't had any questions yet, so I just hope I'm not waffling on too quickly. So, as I've said, emotional needs are key to preventing these kind of things. Now you've got your 7-11 breathing tool. You've got the jogging on the spot tool. I'm now going to talk about another thing that really helps with anxiety, and that's mindfulness and meditation. So I'm sure that those are words that you're familiar with, because they're used a lot in society now, which is great. But people need to be doing these things regularly to notice the benefits. So something I use with a lot of clients is guided visualization or guided imagery, which is kind of just another word for meditation, really. So getting somebody into a really deep and relaxed state where they can actually access the parts of their brain that are shut off when they're emotional or highly aroused, which is another word for anxious. So another thing that's key to mention here actually is that women tend to be more anxious generally than men, and I don't know whether that's because we're more emotional and we're more in tune with people, so we can sense other people's energies as well. So I keep looking back to my notes because I'm aware that I'm kind of going from one point to another and it's not really flowing today, but that's just a reflection of me today. I'm all over the place. So as soon as, what I'd like to know actually from those of you that are watching is, what are your physical responses to anxiety? Because everyone's are different. And some people it's headaches, some people it's they just stop sleeping and they become really irritable, some people lose their appetite, some people just have a constant churny tummy, some people feel sick, some people actually vomit. So I'll just list those again because I know some people have just joined. I'd like you to comment, if you want to share, that is, what your physical responses are to anxiety. So I've talked a bit about the panic attacks and how, that sort of manifests physically in hyperventilation and sweating, shaking, that kind of thing. So what do you personally experience with anxiety? For me, it's a loss of appetite, and I feel sick. I don't actually vomit, but I feel like I'm going to vomit, or I feel just that horrible churny stomach kind of feeling. And if it goes on for longer than a couple of days, then I do start to get headaches as well. And I find that all the extra worrying then stops me from sleeping. So that's what it's like for me. But obviously, like I said at the beginning, anxiety is so different for every person. And actually, I think defining or diagnosing anxiety is a very difficult task, because it's like a spectrum. It's not, you don't have to be this and this to then have a tick and say, right, you've got anxiety. We all suffer from varying levels of anxiety, and that depends on what we're going through at the time. And so it's more like a sort of, sorry, I just need some water. It's more like a sort of sliding scale or a spectrum. Can you hear me okay, by the way? No? I've got no, I don't know if because I'm on my phone the comments aren't showing up, or if there isn't any, but I thought that they'd come up on my laptop as well. Never mind. Bear with me a second. So the kind of things that there are different attributional or personality attributional styles that can affect how susceptible you are to things like anxiety and panic attacks. And I've talked about the 3 Ps before, and those are personal, pervasive, and permanent. So these are attributional styles that make you more susceptible to anxiety. So if you take everything personally, and you think it's going to affect every part of your life, and you think it's going to last forever, then you're a person who needs to work on that, because your susceptibility is then quite high, you're high risk. Whereas if you didn't take things personally, or you found other ways to deal with things, and you thought the opposite of pervasive, so you thought, well, this is just one area of my life, and actually the rest of my life is in control. And if you think permanent, if you think the opposite to that, so for instance, you think, okay, this is just a blip and this is going to pass, then you're going to be building your resilience, and therefore less likely to suffer from anxiety or panic attacks. So if you want me to comment those at the end again, I can. So the 3 Ps are personal, pervasive, and permanent. And so the less of that you do, the more perspective you've got, and the more chance you have at dealing whatever comes your way. And some people, you can get anxious at the smallest of things, and it doesn't mean that your anxiety is any sort of less severe than anyone else. It's all about timing what you've got going on in your life, what other stresses there are, and what that anxiety has stemmed from. So it could be that it's a history of anxiety in the family, and there could be something that happened years ago that still bothers you, or it could be something new, like you can just develop a phobia, for instance, all of a sudden. There doesn't necessarily have to be a reason for that, but what I'm saying is that what happens before that and what has happened in that person's life all contributes to how much that anxiety affects them. So bodily changes I've talked about. I apologise if there are comments coming up and I'm just not seeing them. I'll have to go back and answer them afterwards. So yes, what anxiety and panic attacks are doing are releasing the stress hormone, which is cortisol, and that's the same thing that's released in fight or flight. And it obviously does not make us feel good, to put in a very simple way. What it does is it makes us ready for action. So we're ready to fight, flight, or freeze. Oh, sorry. You just have to excuse him. So I wanted to talk about some of the things, or the main things, that make people anxious. And as I've said, this can be really different for anyone. But for me as a therapist, the main things that I'm seeing are usually work pressures. So it usually stems from some sort of work-related stress that then turns into anxiety. And it's often related to a trauma as well. So if there's been a specific trauma in that person's life, anxiety can then develop as a result of that, and be sort of, it can then seep into different parts of people's lives that, where if it was originally specific, it may then become a bigger thing. I'm sorry, I've got loads of notes here, but they're just all scattered around, and I wanted to plan this properly. I might have to do this one again because I'm being a bit rubbish today. Thank you for watching though, those of you who are there. So yes, I've talked about the attributional styles, and there's a whole sort of, I can't remember the word, but when I'm talking about workplace stress and how that can cause anxiety, there's a whole sort of argument about productivity versus pressure. And productivity obviously is a good thing, and you need a bit of pressure to be able to, to have motivation. But too much pressure then affects productivity negatively, and that, makes it affects your effectiveness at your job. So you need to be stretched but not stressed, and they're two very different things. When you're stretched, you're capable of learning and you're motivated and you're getting your needs met. But when you're stressed, your needs are then not being met in balance and things start to go wrong. So the things to do, I mentioned, to calm down, and I know that's easy for me to say, but what I want you to do is find out what makes you calm down. If that's having a bath, then have a bath. If it's breathing and doing some meditation, then do that. If it's cooking, do that. If it's going out for a walk, do that. Doing exercise. There's loads and loads of ways that you can calm down, but you need to do what works for you. Because there's no point in me saying all these things if they don't resonate with you. So find out what works for you to calm down. Work out the source of the anxiety or panic attack. So I've mentioned that at the beginning. Often it's not yourself that's the cause, it's a situation or your environment. So remember that you're not at fault here. And also, it's important to remember that anxiety isn't you. It's always a separate entity from yourself. Like, we talk about depression in this way and kind of try and separate it from ourselves. And anxiety is no different. So it's something that you suffer from, or you suffer symptoms from, but you are not anxiety, or you don't have anxiety. You have the effects of, if that makes sense. So get rid of any sort of areas of your life where you think you might be suffering, or you think there's negative effects. Get rid of them, because you don't need that. It's only going to make you more susceptible. And change the story, change your sort of inner critic and your inner monologue, because we are our own worst enemies a lot of the time, especially women, because we actually have more areas of the brain that work in the emotional brain than men do. I'm not just saying that to say that we're any more intelligent, because they have different parts of the brain that we don't. But we are very, very critical of ourselves, and we can quite easily let, our own thoughts become beliefs and then get bogged down by that when they're actually just thoughts. They're not necessarily accurate. They aren't helpful. They're just thoughts. So changing your inner monologue is all about challenging yourself, challenging perceptions, and believe in yourself, because anxiety can make you feel really, really helpless and insignificant. It's it's a really crippling thing, and I know that in evolution we're designed to experience anxiety because it can save your life, and so it is a quality that we need to have, but unfortunately we experience it for the wrong reasons. And something that's interesting to mention here is that people with people who suffer from anxiety are actually apparently technically more intelligent because we have a more sophisticated imagination. So give yourself a pat on the back because that's something to be proud of. You know, the reason you're suffering from anxiety is because you've got a highly sophisticated imagination. And so what you need to do is learn how to use that in the right way. And that's something that I can help with through these things that I'm going to be developing. I'm going to be developing some courses hopefully really soon. And if anyone wants to work one-to-one with me, then we do a lot of work around that. And it also, actually, it's about reminding yourself of the resources that you've got, you know, without a therapist and without any help. You know, you can deal with this on your own. You've got your memories. You've got, I'm just listing a few of the resources here. So we've got memory, long-term memory. We've got pattern matching. We've got rapport building, so the ability to build connections with other people and share experiences. We have, God, you can tell it's been a long day because my brain is absolutely frazzled. I think the sun's frazzled me a bit as well, so I do apologise. I'm going to have to put these in a comment at the end because I can't remember it right now. I'm too tired. So take a look around you at what you need, what needs are not being met, and the ones that are met, you want to maintain those. So whatever goals you set for yourself, you don't want that to detract from any of your emotional needs. And try and sort of train yourself to be more susceptible to change, because usually change and uncertainty is what sets anxiety off. It's usually what tips the scales. So try and sort of, if you imagine a child, they're really, really adaptable, and animals are absolutely fantastic at this. You know, somebody was trying to explain this to me. If you imagine an animal that's being hunted, that is prey for another animal, they can be being chased 1 minute, so they're in their fight or flight mode, and they know what to do. They don't have to think about it. They just run, and then 10 minutes later, let's say they've got away this time, they are back to their herd, eating, grazing, just going about the normal business. We need to be a bit more like that, because we let things affect us for too long, and we're actually in control of that. So it's really important to be adaptable. That's my other tip. And basically, it's a bit cheesy, but accept that you are only human. And, you know, this, I know it sounds cheesy because that's the name of my company, but I named it that for a reason, to try and get people to understand and to accept that it's okay to only be human, and it's okay to not be okay. So sometimes we're all going to go through periods of time where we're feeling more anxious, or we might have a time when we suddenly have loads of panic attacks, but that's okay as long as you're dealing with it and preventing it from happening again, not letting it consume you. So you need to focus on yourself, but also make sure that you've got a good support network around you, especially if you're a mum, because you need that. You know, you need to be okay for your children, so you need people looking after you as well. They don't have to be nearby, because I live far away from both my parents and my partner's parents, my sister, all my friends, but as long as they're there for you when you need them and they're there at the end of the phone, then that's all that matters. And learn from other people. So if there's anyone that's been through something similar, for instance, then speak to them and find out, how did they get through it? You know, what helped them? We're very, very sociable creatures, but due to life and, you know, life getting in the way, and social media and the internet, we're becoming less and less social. But actually that's how we thrive, and that's how we learn, through other people and experiences. So I hope that that's been a little bit useful. I think it's important, to just remember that you are, you know, it's okay to not be okay, and you are only human. The more stressed you are, or the more kind of unbalanced your life is, the more susceptible you are going to be to anxiety. and panic attacks, for instance. And if there is something that you've suffered with for years, sort of chronically, even if you have regular panic attacks, then please get in touch, because it is something that I can deal with in therapy, but it would need to be in a one-to-one session. Whether that's online or face-to-face, it doesn't matter, but it would need to be a sort of quiet and uninterrupted sort of formal session. And just remember that even, you know, as anxious as you are, getting outside is usually the best thing for you. It doesn't have to be, you know, if being outside is what sort of provokes your anxiety, then obviously that's not going to be a good recommendation. But usually getting outside and just trying to get in touch with nature is absolutely fantastic for your overall mental health, but to calm you down as well, because ultimately, you know, in sort of caveman times, we would have lived outside, and so we are part of nature. We need to reconnect with that to help ourselves. Right, I think I've waffled on for long enough now. I'm just trying to check my notes and see if there's anything I've missed. And I'm really sorry that my comments haven't come up on my phone, so I'm going to have to respond to all of them afterwards. Yeah, something that's important, but not important, it's an interesting fact to know, is that anxiety makes us stupid. So just remember that you're in control of your anxiety, whether you believe that or not, you are. And so what you want to do is regain control of the thinking part of your brain, because when you're in that anxious state, you're actually cutting off parts of your brain, and you're becoming tunnel visioned. You can't focus on, you know, you can't concentrate on one thing that you need to do. You know, you're just like, you're just in this mode, which is kind of our primitive brain. And the reason that happens is because when you are genuinely under a life threat, you know, you need to be able to stop focusing on everything else. You need to be able to just move or freeze. So your digestive system shuts down, your emotional brain shuts down, your thinking brain shuts down, and you just go into this survival mode. And that's what you're experiencing when you have anxiety. So all the things, just to recap, that I've talked about that are going to help is 7-11 breathing, doing some guided meditation. There's loads of stuff on YouTube. If you find something that works for you, then just practice it as much as you can. So working out the source of the anxiety, that's a really useful tool to do. So kind of after the event, go back and analyse it so that you can pinpoint where it's come from and then prevent it next time, or try and avoid the situations that might trigger you. Usually stress is the precursor to anxiety, or any of these things actually. So you can go on and be fine for a while, and then there might be one thing that suddenly affects you, and that's usually because it's been an accumulation of events, and that's just been the straw that broke the camel's back. So it tips the scales, and then all of a sudden everything might become anxiety provoking again. Rest as well. You really need to concentrate on getting the right food in you and getting rest when you can, because all the anxiety and worrying that you're going to be experiencing is going to affect the quality of your sleep. So really try and focus on that as well. And I would say questions, but my comments aren't coming up, so please do post some, and I can always get back to you afterwards. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry that I've been a bit scatty today, but that's just how I'm feeling, so I'm not going to lie. I will speak to you again soon, and hopefully the next one will be a bit more organised. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.